he was talking about the fact that the sensoria are dominant in the human personality, and he says that I thought I turned this off. Sorry. These problems, technology, it's very rude, just interrupts, no manners. People used to, they would come and knock on the door, and you could either answer the door or not. Now it's the telephone. It's just wherever you go. Shaykh Khatri, he said that people talk about servitude in Mauritania, but he said the servants in Mauritania, he says once they're over the hill, they're gone. You can't call them back. But he said, here, he said, everybody's the slave, because he said they just call on the phone and suddenly they're, we need you at the office. So he says that the problem is that people don't want to obey the intellect because it's telling them to do things that they they want to do them, and it's telling them not to, or telling them to do something that they don't want to do. So he said that for this reason it said al-aqlu sadiqun maqtu'un wal-hawa aduun matbu'un, that the intellect, and it's important to remember that when they use intellect, they don't mean the same thing that we mean by intellect today. The aql is a light. It's an immaterial light that we perceive reality with. And it's a very high thing. And even the medieval scholastics in the Western tradition understood it as something very different from what it's understood today to be. It's more of a cognitive function today as opposed to something that that has an intuitive quality, but also has a capacity that's extraordinary in its immense possibilities. So it has, in our tradition, we have all these different names for it. So it's called the ruh, it's called the nafs, it's called the aql, it's called the fu'ad, it's called the nuha, it's called the lub. I mean, the al-hija. There's all these different names, and the Arabs say katharat al-asami tadulu ala azamat al-musamma, that many names indicate the immensity of the thing named. So Allah's, we don't know Allah's names. Allah has names that we know 121 names if we look in the tradition that we've been given, like the Qur'an has. If you include what they call the asma al-mushtaqqa. But the Arabs name things that have great import. And so, like, for instance, the lion has many names. There's over 500 names for the lion in Arabic. So the lion is something, and there were a lot of lions on the Arabian Peninsula. So it was something immense to the Arabs, like the lion. And the dog has many names in Arabic. There's a famous Abu Ali al-Ma'arri who was blind. A man bumped into him and called him a qalb. Because he was blind, he bumped into the man. The man called him a qalb, and he said, "Al-kalbu man la ya'rufu 50 isman lil-kalb." The real dog is the one that doesn't know 50 names for dog. And so Imam Suyuti wrote a tabarri min sibab al-ma'arri, how to get out of the curse of al-ma'arri. So he wrote a book on the 50 names of the dogs, so you could learn them and not be a kalb, according to Abu Ala. So the intellect has many names because there are many different aspects to the intellect. It's a multifaceted phenomenon, and consciousness study is one of the obsessions of modern people, because we have a whole slew of these people that want to prove that consciousness is material. The judgment, even in modern science, they don't really fully understand consciousness, where it comes from, They understand aspects of the brain. Neuroscience is very well developed. But they don't understand consciousness, especially the qualitative aspect of consciousness, like how we experience things qualitatively, not quantitatively, not measurably, but how we experience things qualitatively that you can't put your hand on it. There's nothing there to indicate that it's a material phenomenon. It's an immaterial phenomenon. And that's why consciousness for us is a proof of the immaterial world. The very fact that we're conscious, even though God's put us in these bodies, we're embodied, and so we experience consciousness through the sensoria, but we also have a priori reason. We have the ability to think outside of the sensoria. We can think about things that we have no experience in the sensoria of them, and contemplate them. And so he's pointing this out, that the intellect, it's a momentous thing, and it's something that we should listen to, but we don't. So he says, he quotes the poet who says, إذا ما دعتك النفس يوما بشهوة وكان عليها للقبيح الطريق فدعها وخالف ما اشتهيت فإنها عدو ودود والخلاف صديق. That if your nafs, if this lower self calls you one day to some appetite, and it was something foul, it would lead to a foul thing, then he says, leave it and go against what you're desiring, because desire is a friendly enemy, right? So it's tricking you. And he says, وَالْخِلَافُ صَدِيقُ, to go against it is your real friend. And the Prophet ﷺ, for that reason, said, حُفَّتَ الْجَنَّةُ بِالْمَكَارِهِ وَحُفَّتَ النَّارُ بِالشَّهَوَاتِ. He also said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and it's one of the foundational hadiths, according to Imam al-Nawawi in the Arba'in, he said that the Prophet ﷺ was reported to have said, لَا يُؤْمِنُ أَحَدُكُمْ حَتَّى يَكُونَ هَوَاهُ تَبَعًا لِمَا جِئْتُ بِهِ. That none of you truly believes until the hawa, the desire of the person, is in accordance with what I have brought. So initially you have to struggle with that. But once the sunnah becomes your habit, it's your want, you've habituated yourself to following the Prophet's guidance, then you have the malaka of virtue. And so your hawa now is in accordance with what he desired. I was with a man once who now apparently lives in Arizona and has a coffee shop, but I was thinking, somebody was telling me about him yesterday, but I remember he had just become Muslim, and that somebody offered him a date, and he said he didn't like dates, and the person offering him a date said, oh, the Prophet loved dates, and he said, oh, I love dates, and he took the date and ate it, and that is the way we should be with the Prophet ﷺ. Even though you don't have to follow what were those things that were cultural to the Prophet ﷺ. There are certain things that are cultural. They're not really sunan. They're cultural things. But people who love the Prophet ﷺ will even follow those things. So the Prophet brought us this amazing tradition, and so we should love it. And our hawa, our desire, should be in accordance with it. ولذلك يحتاج الإنسان أن يقاد في مبادئ أمره إلى مصالحه بضرب من القهر. And for this reason, the human being should be led in the beginning of his affair to these benefits with really a type of coercion. In other words, you should coerce yourself. It's not from outside. لا إكراه في الدين. You can't coerce people to virtue. I mean, obviously, your children, you have some level of you can compel them to a certain degree, but in the end, it's much better to get them to love things, because as a wise Greek said, that things that are learned through compulsion never stay. They don't stay. And that's why, one of the things that Dr. Cleary said was very interesting. He said about that verse, La ikraha fi din, he said, true religion comes from the heart. One should not feel compelled to pray. One should want to pray. And that's really when the religion has become real for you. It's no longer this thing you have to do. It's the thing that you want to do. It's very different. La ikraha fi din. So he says initially, and this is why the Prophet said, "Ya ajaban liqawmin yuqaduna ila al-jannah bis-salasil." So this is about a group of people that he knew would become Muslim, and he saw them. They were prisoners after the battle, and they were not tied up, and he laughed when he saw them. I mean, and the Prophet did not laugh qahqaha. The Arabs call it qahqaha, yuqahqihu, like ha ha ha. The Prophet, his laugh was a smile, and even you rarely saw his nawajid, the molars, those front molars. But usually he would smile where they said they could see his canines. So he was smiling, seeing these people, and one of them thought, why are you, these people are in tribulation, why are you smiling? And he said, ajaban, like it's wondrous to see people that are being taken to paradise in chains. Because he knew they would become Muslim. So even though they were opposing him then, he knew that they would become Muslim. And so he just saw that. And that's why Ibn Ata'illah, one of the things he says in the Hikam, he says that if you don't come to Allah with ihsan, right, then He will bring you with salasil al-imtihan, the chains of tribulation. Like if you don't go to Him from His ihsan, He will give you tribulations in your life to drive you to Him. So it's always better to go from His ihsan, like because His ihsan is so immense, and just out of gratitude. وحق الإنسان أن يجاهد هواه إلى أن يقتحم العقبة فيتخلص حينئذ من أذاه. So he says that it's appropriate for a man, for a human being. Insan really is a genderless. It means both male and female. حق الإنسان أن يجاهد هواه, to struggle against one's passion, إلى أن يقتحم العقبة, until you actually reach the acme. So you've gone up the steep ascent, which is difficult. I just climbed a hill, and by the end of it you're huffing and puffing, but when you get to the top there's a great relief. And so that's what he's saying. فَيَتَخَلَّصْ حِينَئِذٍ مِنْ أَذَاهُ. So you're free from the harm of the self. And Ibn al-Munkadir, who was Imam Malik's teacher, one of the great Medinan scholars, he said, جَاهَدْتُ نَفْسِي 50 سَنَةً حَتَّى اسْتَقَامَتْ لِي. I struggled with myself for 50 years until it was finally in submission and upright for me. So this is a war with yourself. You're struggling against yourself. And the worst thing that people do is give in to their self. It's the worst thing that people do. And you'll never feel good about yourself if you give in to yourself. You will only feel good about yourself if you fight yourself. If you don't fight yourself, you won't feel good about yourself. When you achieve something after great effort, that's always an immense inshirah that comes. There's an expansion in your heart that comes from striving for something, and like when you learn something. So then he says, لِلنَّفْسِ نَظَرًا. So the nafs has two. It has two. There's two things that the soul is directed to. It's looking to two things. نظر إلى فوق نحو العقل. It's either looking upward towards the intelligibles. ومنه تستمد المعارف وتميز بين المحاسن والقبائح وتعرف كيف تتحرى المحاسن وتتجنب القبائح. And from that, it's able to master, draw from these sciences and knowledges, and also distinguish between what is good and what is evil, what's ugly and what is beautiful. And then also to know how to seek what's beneficial and to avoid what's harmful, to seek what's beautiful, to avoid what's ugly, to seek what's virtuous and to avoid what's vicious. So and then the second view perspective. إلى تحت نحو الهواء. It's looking at down. So it's a downward. One's looking upward, one's looking downward. And so he says, وَبِهِ تَنْسَى الْحَقَائِقِ. And because of this, the soul forgets the realities. It forgets those higher things. وَتَأْلَفَ الْخَسِيسَاتِ. And it will become accustomed to contemptible things, to low things, things that are unworthy of our nature. بَلَ الْقَاذُورَاتِ. Even foul things. So the khasisa is a low thing, but the qadura is something it's defiling. It will defile you. And there's things that you can do in this life where it will make you feel defiled if you do that. Sinfulness defiles the soul, and that's why there's a motif in a lot of films where they will show somebody who's been defiled, and then the next scene will show a shower scene, because there's this need to be purified. So if somebody's violated, they want to be purified. But when you violate yourself, right? It's one thing to be violated by another person, but what happens when you violate yourself? When you violate the sanctity of your own soul? And that also needs it needs tawbah, and it needs cleansing. So he's saying, وَالنَّفْسُ مَتَى كَانَتْ شَرِيفَةً أَدَامَتَ النَّظَرَ إِلَى مَا فَوْقَهَا. When the soul is noble, then it continues its perspective. It's looking always to what's above it. كما ذكرنا. ولا تنظر إلى ما دونها إلا عند الضرورة. And it will not look at what's beneath it except out of necessity. ولا تتناول اللذات البدنية إلا بحسب ما يرسمه العقل المستمد من الشرع. And it will not engage in these pleasures except to the degree with which, and he's talking about the bodily pleasures, اللذات البدنية, except to the degree with which reason has decreed it to be appropriate. So there is a time Allah has made us passionate beings. We have appetites. They're important, and through it we sustain through food we sustain our bodies, through intimacy we sustain our species, and also take respite from the dunya. So this, he's not saying that we're not like these sannyasis or the monks. The Prophet said, "La rahbaniyata fil Islam." There's no monkhood in Islam. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, my sunnah is to marry. I marry. He said, atazawwaj. He said, whoever turns away from my sunnah is faqad aba. Man raghbi an sunnati faqad aba. Whoever turns away from my sunnah, he's refused. Meaning he's refused Jannah. So the Prophet, which doesn't mean, again, that, we have to be careful with these things because people can misunderstand them. It doesn't mean that there hasn't been, there are scholars that didn't marry. Imam Nawawi never married. Ibn Taymiyyah never married. So there's scholars that never married. But they didn't do it as a devotional practice. And that's the difference. It's like not eating meat. If you choose not to eat meat because, one, you don't like it, then you're like Amr Abul Lahm, the Sahabi who didn't eat meat. There's one Sahabi who didn't eat meat, and the Prophet ﷺ aqarru alayh. So you can be a vegetarian in Islam. There's no problem with that. But if you do it devotionally, then you've made a bid'ah. That's the difference. And so if you're saying, it's higher not to marry, then you've made a bid'ah. Because the sunnah is to marry. It's higher to marry than to not marry. So that's important. So it doesn't mean you have to do something. But if you leave it, you don't leave it because for a spiritual or a religious reason. There's other considerations. And then he says, وَإِذَا كَانَتْ النَّفْسُ دَنِيَّةً أكثرت الميل إلى الشهوات البدنية فيحدث ذلك لها إذعانا وإنقيادا للشهوات البدنية فيستعبدها الهوى كما قال الله تعالى أفرأيت من اتخذ إلهه هواه وضله الله على علم. So he says, if the soul is pusillanimous, if it's a diminished soul, if it's a low soul, And this is important because these are realities. I mean, this is not something that's decreed for you. It's where your energies go. It's where you put your energy. So because the soul can grow. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. Zakkaha means to grow. So he or she has had success who has grown the soul, right? So magnanimous means big soul. It's a soul that has grown. So it's important to what he's saying here is that this low soul, this daniya, is the one who inclines towards these things and then becomes really into he actually yuhdithu dhalika laha id'anan wa inqiyadan, and that inclination then engenders in him a type of submissiveness to his bodily appetites, to the point where they actually enslave him. He becomes enslaved by his passion. Kama qala Allah ta'ala, have you not considered the one who took as his God his passion? وَأَضَلَّهُ اللَّهُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ. And so Allah then allowed him to go astray with knowledge. عَلَى عِلْمٍ, despite the knowledge. وَإِنَّمَا أَضَلَّهُ بَعْدَ أَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهُ هَوَاهُ. He went astray after he had taken his passion as his God. وَجَعَلَهُ عَبْدًا لِلْأَغْرَاضِ الدُّنْيَوِيَّةِ, and made him a servant, a slave of his worldly aspirations, his worldly motives. كما قال النبي تعس عبد الدرهم تعس عبد الدينار. Wretched is the slave of the gold, and wretched is the slave of the silver. ومن هذه العبودية استعاد إبراهيم, and from this servitude Ibrahim sought refuge. حيث قال واجنبني وبني أن نعبد الأصنام. Help me, cause me to divert me from and my children, my offspring, from worshiping the idols. And the biggest idol is the idol of the self. It's the nafs. The Prophet ﷺ said, أَعْدَ عَدُوِكَ نَفْسُكَ الَّتِي بَيْنَ جَنْبَيْكَ. The worst enemy you have is what's between your two souls. So ظهور الإنسان في شعار الموجودات now وتخصيصه بقوة شيء فشيء منها. So ظهور الإنسان في شعار الموجودات. So here the human being, as they manifest amidst these existent, these emblematic existent things that we have, and then how he is particularized with this power in their midst. So he says, ذات الإنسان من حيث ما اجتمعت فيه قوة الموجودات صار وعاء عن العالم. The human being's essence, in terms of what is gathered in it from all the potentialities of existent things, has become a vesicle for the meanings of the world. إنما الكون معان قائمة بالصور. The whole world are meanings set up in images. كل من يدرك هذا كان من أهل العبر. So your ability is to penetrate the meanings of existence. That's what you have. And so that's what he's saying, that you are a wi'a for ma'ani al-alam. You are a wi'a for ma'ani al-kawn. كل من يدرك هذا كان من أهل العبر. Whoever understands that all of existence are forms, their meanings set up in forms. But people get lost in the form. They get lost in the surah and they lose the ma'na. So then he says, وطينة صوره ومعدن آثاره ومجمع حقائقه وكأنه مركب من جمادات ونبات وبهائم وسباع وشياطين وملائكة ولذلك قد يظهر في شعار كل واحد من ذلك. So he says that he is the gathering place of all of these realities. He is the mine of all of their effects. And so he says, it's as if he is the composite of the inanimate, the vegetable, the animal, the high animals, the demons, and the angels. All of them come together in the human being. وَلِذَلِكَ قَدْ يَظْهَرُ فِي شِعَارِ كُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّن ذَلِكَ. And for this reason, those things that are emblematic in each one of those things can manifest in that person. Those things that really essentialize each one of those types of things can manifest in that person. So he says, فَيَجْرِي تَارَةً مَجْرَى الْجَمَادَاتِ. Sometimes he is like the inanimate things in his laziness. There's no motility. There's no volition. It's somebody who has no will. وَقِلَّةَ تَتَحَرَّكْ. Doesn't move. وَالْإِنْبِعَاث. There's nothing that is engendering in him. There's no incentivizing. There's nothing will incentivize him. وعلى هذا نبه الله تعالى بقوله ثم قست قلوبهم من بعد ذلك فهي كالحجارة أو أشد قسوة. So their hearts became hard after that. They were like stones or even harder. So Allah says, they're like that mineral world. وقد يظهر في شعار النباتات. Or sometimes those things that are emblematic in the vegetable world. الحميدة أو الذميمة. Either praiseworthy or blameworthy. فيصير إما كالأترج الذي يطيب حمره ونوره وعوده وورقه أو كالنخل والكرم فيما يلي من النفع أو كالكشوث في عدم الخير أو كالحنظر في خبث المذاق. وعلى هذا نبه الله تعالى بقوله ضرب الله مثلا كلمة طيبة كشجرة طيبة أصلها ثابت وفرعها في السماء ومثل كلمة خبيثة كشجرة خبيثة اجتثت من فوق الأرض ما لها من قرار. So he says that sometimes they're like these vegetable things, like for instance the atruj. The atruj, I mean, they usually say it's a lemon hindi. It's like a grapefruit. I really feel it's the orange. In Spanish they say naranja, which I think maybe came from that, Allahu A'lam. But because the Prophet ﷺ said the mu'min that reads the Qur'an is like the truj. رِيحُهُ طَيِّبٌ وَطَعْمُهُ طَيِّب. It has a good smell and it tastes good. And he said, وَالْمُؤْمِنَ الَّذِي لَا يَقْرَأُ الْقُرْآنَ كَالتَّمَرِ لَا رِيحَ لَهُ وَطَعْمُهُ حُلْوٌ. It has no smell, but it has a good taste. And he said, الْمُنَافِقَ الَّذِي يَقْرَأُ الْقُرْآنَ كَالرَّيْحَانَ. It has a sweet scent, but it's bitter to taste. And the one that doesn't read the Qur'an is like the handal. No scent, but it's bitter to taste. So that's what he's saying here, is that we have those qualities. So he says the atruj he says it's like it has a good scent, it has a beautiful flower, it has nice the oud is good, the wood and the leaf of it, or like the date palm, or like the grapevine, in that they give so much benefit, because they give benefit not just in their food, but also in all the uses. I mean, the Arabs used the date for so many things. They used it for writing on, they used it for, the Prophet ﷺ flossed his teeth with the date fiber. They used it for building. A lot of building materials come from the date palm. And they also used it for clothing as well. So many, many benefits from the date. And then he says, kashuth. The kashuth is if you go to the south, they have these big trees, and they have this, it's like gossamer. It hangs from the tree. I don't know what they call it. There's a word for it in English, though. But it's a rootless type of parasite. It's a rootless moss. It's like a moss on the trees. So that's what he means by kushuth. There's no good. It's just there, and it has its own kind of beauty, because everything Allah makes is beautiful. So even the when you see like a dead tree, there's something beautiful about a dead tree. Or you take like somebody like Georgia O'Keeffe. I mean, she did many drawings of skeletons, just of cows' heads that she would see out in the New Mexican desert. So everything Allah makes is beautiful. Whereas our garbage is ugly. Human garbage is ugly. But all of God's waste products, when you see them, like you go and see dead seaweed on the beach, there's a beauty to it. And so even with the kushuth, but he's saying it doesn't really have any benefit. It's actually not good for a tree. أو كحنظل في خبث المذاق, or like colocynth, because it has a foul taste. وعلى هذا نبه الله تعالى بقوله ضرب الله. So then Allah has showed us this when He said, a good word is like a good tree. Its roots are firm and its branches are in the heavens, which is La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. And a bad tree is foul. A bad word is like a foul tree. It has no, it'll just be uprooted easily, and it has no stability. Like, a tree that's rotten, when the winds come, it just blow it over, but just pull it out. You'll see the roots pulled out. And then he says, or like كالطير المسمى بأبو الوفاء في الوفاء. There's a bird called Abu al-Wafa, which means the loyal bird. So, because it comes back to the same place again and again. And so there's people like that are very loyal. Or كخنزير في الشرع, or like the pig in its appetite, greed. Or كالذئب في العيث, or like the wolf in its عيث is like causing trouble. So it's a troublemaker. The wolf comes in and eats all the chickens. أو كالكلب في الحرص, or like the dog in its covetousness. أو كالنمل في الجمع, or like the ant in its, ants are hoarders, right? There's people that are hoarders. So he's saying that there's people like ants, there's people like dogs, there's people like rats. أو كالفأرة, I mean, we even use that term, he's a rat, right? أو كالفأرة في السرقة. أو كالثعلب في المراوغة, or like the fox in its craftiness. يراوغ. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that towards the latter days he wished that the ulama would يراوغ راوغان ثعلب. They would be more like the fox, because the fox is weak. So when the Muslims have no power, they should be more like the fox. Because the fox is a weak animal, but it makes up with its weakness with its intelligence. It's crafty. That's why Aesop always has the fox. The lion invites the fox into the cave. And the fox said, I think I'll pass. And the lion said, well, I'm just being hospitable. And he says, I see all these fox footprints going in, but I don't see any coming out. So the fox is smart, and that's why Aesop uses him like that. So, أو كالقرد في المحاكاة, or like the monkey in its imitative nature. The monkey does yuhaki, right? The Sudanese, they say, li ma عنده ورد قرد. If you don't have a wird, like if you don't have a devotional practice every day, you're like a monkey. Li ma عنده ورد قرد. So قرد. أو كالحمار في البلادة, or like the donkey in its stupidity. The donkey is like a dumb animal. It doesn't obey, right? And it'll just, you can beat it and it just, it won't budge. It's got this stubbornness to it. أو كالثور في الغمارة, or like the thawr in a kind of its rashness. Like it'll, the thawr will just out of rage attack something. وعلى هذا النحو من المشابهات دل الله تعالى بقوله وما من دابة في الأرض ولا طائر يطير بجناحه إلا أمثالكم ما فرطنا في الكتاب من شيء ثم إلى ربهم يحشرون. So there's no dabba. Dabba is anything that walks on the earth. Dabba yadibbu dabiban. Anything that walks on the earth is dabba. but it can also, dabbat al-ard is the termite, right? But it's usually, dabba is like a kind of imperceptible, because most animals, if you notice, are very quiet because they all have natural enemies. So you very often don't notice animals. Like cats, you won't even notice cats. And animals in nature are very, they're always, their ears are always checking, because they all have natural enemies. So he says there's no dabba in the earth or a bird flying in the air with its two wings, except their communities like unto yourselves. All right, so that's what he's saying, that we have all these things in us, which is why many, many traditional peoples, and the Arabs still do this. We don't do it so much. I think there might be a few names left that do have some, but traditional peoples always named their children after animals. It's very common, because they were looking at the positive. They didn't name them cockroaches or rats, or they named them eagles, and like Saqar is an Arab name, Fahad, Asad, right? These are high things. In some of the Native American tradition, they would name them after animals with defects, but they did it because they wanted an animal that has a defect will make up for it with its cleverness. So it was kind of a way of, wanting them to have some kind of benefit from that. So he says, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَا, and then he says, وَيَظْهَرُ تَارَةً فِي شِعَارِ الشَّيَاطِينِ, and sometimes in those things that are emblematic to the demons, فَيُغْوِي وَيُضِلُّ وَيُسَوِّلَ الْبَاطِلَ فِي صُورَةِ الْحَقِّ, so they will lead astray and misguide and convince somebody that falsehood is, they will deem falsehood and make it appear to be true. فَيَبْتَغِيَ الضَّلَالَ, they seek error. وَيَتَّبِعَ الْهَوَى, and follow their passions. كما دل الله تعالى عليه بقوله وكذلك جعلنا لكل نبي عدوا شياطين الإنس والجن يوحي بعضهم إلى بعض زخرف القول غرورا. And like that, we have made made for every prophet enemies from the shayateen al-ins wal-jinn. So the human shayateen are the worst ones. They're the worst. Now the shayateen, the marada, are locked up, but the human shayateen are in, they're in full force always. So then he says, وَيَظْهَرُ تَارَةً فِي شِعَارِ الْمَلَائِكَةِ, and sometimes he manifests in those things that are emblematic to the angels. فَيَتْبَعُ الدِّينِ وَيَعْصِي الْهَوَى, he follows the way of the deen, piety, and disobeys his inordinate passions. وإنما يكون إنسانا إذا وضع كل واحدة من هذه الأشعرة في موضعها حسب ما يقتضيه العقل المستضيء والمستبصر بنور الشرع. So place all of these emblematic aspects of these things in their proper place, that is governed by a illuminated and piercing intellect that is illuminated by the light of the Sharia. Wallahu a'lam, and Allah knows best. So then he goes into mahiyatul insan. Mahiya is a really interesting word, because it's one of these. It's a portmanteau word that comes from mahiya, and the medieval scholastics clearly got this word from us, because they talk about the quiddity, which is quid est, which is exact same thing, mahiya. So that was their translation from the Arabic text when they talked about the mahiya. So the mahiya is what gives you the essence of something. It tells you what it is because you perceive, you abstract the form. So in the causes, you see the formal cause of the thing. And seeing the formal cause, right, is what enables you to penetrate the mahiya. Like you say, what is it? Like, what is this? What's its mahiya? This is a book. And then you can define the book of what it is. So now he's going to get into what is a human being? What's the mahiya? What is it? A human being. ماهية الإنسان ماهية كل شيء تحصل بصورته التي يتميز بها عن أغياره كصورة السكين والسيف والمنجل ونحوها. So the essence of the quiddity of everything is acquired through its form that distinguishes it from all other things, like the form of a knife or a sword or a minjal. So those three things can be used. All of them can be used, I mean, for different things, but generally they're weapons, really, right? They're blades of some sort. So the minjal, you use it to harvest wheat or harvest corn. The scythe, I think it's scythe or scythe. Anybody? Scythe, yeah. So the minjal is that's what you use to harvest. The sword you use to fight usually, and then the sakin can be used for fighting or for many. It's one of the most beneficial tools that humans have. There's tools that the Arabs call al-muhillat. The muhillat are the tools that if you have them, you don't need anybody. That's what the Arabs say. You can go wherever you want. Halla haythu sha'a. If you have the muhillat, halla haythu sha'a. Like, and it's said that the Adam alayhi salam came down with the anvil and the hammer when he came to the earth. That was the thing he needed to, because we're tool makers. We're unique. There are many creatures build houses, but no creatures use tools. Right? Not like humans. We make tools. So these are the mahillat. So you know us the different. You can tell the difference between a sword and a knife by its form. I mean, obviously you get to a point where it gets fuzzy. So is it a hill or is it a mountain? I mean, this is where fuzzy logic comes in. But generally, harakat mutanatti'un. Generally you can see something clearly for what it is, and that's the form of a thing. ولما كان الإنسان جزئين بدن محسوس وروح معقول كما نبه الله تعالى عليه بقوله إني خالق من بشر من طين فإذا سويته ونفخت فيه من روحي فقعوا له ساجدين. So the human being is both a sentient being but also an immaterial being. So we're sentient and immaterial at the same time. We're both spiritual and material. And he said this is what Allah meant when he said, I'm creating a human being from clay. So there's our materiality. فَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. There's our spirituality. So when we fashioned the clay and then breathed into it the soul from the amr of Allah. So that's فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ. That's what makes us worthy of the honor that the angels were commanded to show us, is that we're unique. ثُمَّ أَنشَأْنَهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ. We made the human being a different creation. We're a completely unique creation. Allah has made us completely unique. And this is where modern people, they have a spiritual dementia because they've forgotten who they are. And this is one of the great tragedies of modern people. We have forgotten that we were created fi ahsani taqweem, in the best of statures. The human being was created in the best of statures. And so that's what he's saying here, is that we have both. وَكَانَ لَهُ بِحَسْبِ كُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنَ الْجُزْئَيْنِ صُورَةً. So for this reason, he has, from both perspectives, a form. فصورته المحسوسة البدنية انتصاب القامة وعرض الظفر وتعري البشرة عن الوبر والضحك. So the palpable form, the sentient form of that we can see through the sensory of the body, is that we're upright in stature, that we have these broad fingernails, that we have a denuded skin. So we have the skin is without fur, right? There's no wabar like other animals. And then dhahak, risibility, right? That's the rasam. You guys studied logic. So the had is haywan natiq. That's had al-tam, jami'un, mani'un. But then you have had al-rasam, right? The description. So the description is insanun dhahik. We're risible creatures. So those are all from the sentience of the human being. وصورة المعقولة الروحانية العقل والفكر والروية والنطق. Those are in the intelligible, immaterial, spiritual form is in the intellect, is in the understanding, is in the deliberation, is in the speech. Those are what make the human being a spiritual being. And that's why speaking, إنه لحق, this is the truth. How? مثل ما أنتم تنطقون, just like you're speaking. Because speech it has the materiality of sound waves and vocables and alfaz, but the meanings that are carried in it are immaterial. Those can only be understood by the intellect. So you can hear, if you hear a crow, caw, caw, I don't know what the crow's saying, right? You can hear that, but it's not intelligible to you other than that you can perceive that's a crow. Or the owl, who. What's it saying? But when we speak, and one of the things that Wolfgang Smith said, which I found fascinating, he said, if you really deliberate on speech, you will understand that as speech is coming, because where it's coming from, we don't know. This flow that comes out of human beings as we speak, this intelligible flow, and then it comes to you, and then you have to decode it. Just to understand what I'm saying, just these sentences, the sophistication of human syntax, of sentences, of all the meanings that are embedded in these words, of all the possibilities, of the fact that your mind can hear these things and put them all together. This is a complete miracle. And it's immaterial. It's immaterial. And people, we're doing it every day. And it's amazing. It's so stunning and so powerful. So that's what he's saying, like this is our form that proves that we are an immaterial being. قالوا فالإنسان هو الحيوان الناطق. So he's saying قالوا المناطق. The logician said the human being is a rational animal. ولم يعنوا بالنطق اللفظ المعبر به فقط بل عنوا به المعاني المختصة بالإنسان. They didn't mean this vocable that we're articulating. No, they meant the meanings that are being expressed. Right? That's what they meant by it. فقد يعبر عن جملة الشيء بأخص ما فيه. We can summarize something by just saying something very particular about it. أو بأشرفه أو بأوله. We have metonymy. We can say, oh, the White House announced today. I mean, whoa. Like, have you thought about that? Like how we use these metaphors. The pen is mightier than the sword. I mean, how did you understand that? Think about that, really. How did you understand that? How do you understand what the symbol of a pen means in relation to the symbol of a sword? Because that's not literal. That's just saying that intelligence is mightier in reality than force. Right? But how are we able to derive these meanings from these things? This is the secret of the human being. كقولك سورة الرحمن. So I can say Surah Ar-Rahman, and look what that means to you. I mean, this is amazing. That a human, because then you can think فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. You can think all these things that I evoke by simply saying Surah Ar-Rahman or Arus al-Quran, the bride of the Quran. All these things that come from that. Or Surah Yusuf, the 12th chapter, right? The chapter that was revealed, that tells the story, the only chapter in the Quran that is a contained story. There are many things just from Surah Yusuf saying that. It evokes all of these meanings. Surah Li'ilaf, Quraysh, right? The Quraysh are named after the shark. You know that they have San Jose Sharks? Because they use teams like sharks is a name because they're fearsome. So the Arabs called the Quraysh. They named it was one man was named Quraysh, but the tribe became Banu Quraysh, right? Because the shark is the most awesome beast in the ocean. The great white shark that's it. No, and he knows it too. He knows it. Like these, you see these falcons around here. If you've seen some of the red-tailed hawks, I've seen them perched up on these trees, and they know they're at the top of the food chain. You could just see it in them. Whereas the poor little squirrel's like petrified, terrified that a hawk's going to get him, right? But that hawk is just up there. He's not afraid of anybody. He's just looking around. They go, I think it's like they're well over 100 miles per hour. They're going like 200 miles per hour when they dive on their prey. And they're, how that nose, that beak is like that. So the air doesn't go in because it would blow out their lungs. So the beak is designed so they can dive like that. So that's from Quraysh, li'ilaf Quraysh. All those meanings that came out of li'ilaf Quraysh, just thinking about Quraysh and animals. فَالْإِنسَانُ يُقَالُ عَلَى الضَّرْبَيْنِ عَامٌ وَخَاصٌ. The human being can be looked at from two perspectives, general and specific. فالعام أن يقال لكل منتصب القامة ومختص بقوة الفكر واستفادة العلم. So you can look at it like he's upright, he has the ability, the potentiality for thought, he benefits from knowledge. And then al-khas أن يقال لمن عرف الحق فاعتقده, those who actually know the truth. So the general humanity has potentialities. They have the form of the human, they have the potential, but then you have those special people, the elite, who actually know the truth and believe the truth, and they do virtuous actions. وَالْخَيْرَ, they know good. فَعَمِلَهُ, and they act accordingly. بِحَسَبِ وُسْعِهِ وَإِمْكَانِهِ, based on his ability and his capabilities. وَهَذَا مَعْنًى يَتَفَاضَلُ فِيهِ النَّاسِ. This is a meaning that people they vary in this. So some are better than others. وَيَتَفَاوَتُونَ فِيهِ تَفَاوُتٌ بَعِيدًا, and they distinguish themselves with great distances from each other in these things. وَبِحَسْبِ تَحْصِيلِهِ يَسْتَحِقُّ الْإِنسَانِيَّةِ. In achieving this, the human being warrants humanity. They deserve to be called a human being. وهي تعاطي الفعل المختص بالإنسان. It's those that engage in those actions that are peculiar to the human being. فيقال فلان أكثر إنسانية من فلان. And this is why we say he's more human than he is. He has more humanity than he does. وكما يقال الإنسان على الضربين يقال له الحيوان الناطق على وجهين. And just as the human being can be looked at from these two perspectives, when we say that the human being is a rational animal, we can look at that from two perspectives. We can look at it from a general perspective. يراد به من قوة نوعه استفادة الحق والخير كقولك الإنسان هو الكاتب دون الفرس والحمار. And that is in terms of the potentialities that are distinct, like benefiting from the truth and goodness. For instance, we say the human being is a writer, unlike the horse or the donkey. أي هو الذي في قوته استفادة الكتابة. In other words, he has the potentiality to be a writer, whether he writes or not. وخاص يراد به من حصل الحق فاعتقده والخير فعمله كما يقال زيد هو الكاتب دون عمر أي هو المختص بعلم الكتابة. And then you have the specific of it. So when we say that he has actually achieved the truth and believed it, or he has achieved virtue and acted accordingly, or we say Zayd is a writer whereas Amr is not. In other words, he has the knowledge of writing. وَكَذَا يُقَالُ لَهُ عَبْدَ اللَّهِ عَلَى وَجْهَيْنِ. And like that we say the servant of God from two. The first one, يُرَادُ بِهِ الْحَيْوَانِ الْمُعَرَّض لِاغْتِسَامِ أَوَامِرِ اللَّهِ. In the first one, we mean the animal that is exposed to the obligations or the decrees of the commands of God. ارتسم أو لم يرتسم, whether they obeyed the dictates or not. وهو المشار إليه بقوله تعالى إن كل من في السماوات والأرض إلا آتي الرحمن عبدا. Everything in the heavens and the earth will come to the Rahman, the Merciful, as a slave, a servant. So that's what he's saying. Everybody, whether they like it or not, they're Abdullah. But then there's the khas. وهو المرتسم لأوامر الله تعالى بالفعل. This is the one who adheres to the commandments of Allah in actuality. كما قال سبحانه إن عبادي ليس لك عليهم سلطان. Allah says to Shaitan, you have no authority over my servants. وكذا يقال له حي وسميع وبصير ومتكلم وعاقل وكل ذلك على وجهين. And like that we say he's living, he's hearing, he's seeing, he's speaking, he's intelligent. We say that in two different ways. The first one, يقال in a general way. And that means that he, لمن له حياة الحيوانية, he has animal life, التي بها الحس, so he's sentient, والتخيل, he can imagine, he's got perception, والنزوع, inclinations, والشهوة, appetites, ولمن يسمع الأصوات, he can hear things, ولمن يدرك الألوان, he can see things, he can perceive colors, he can hear sounds, ولمن يفهم الكافة ما يريده, he can speak and say to, help others to understand what he wants, ولمن له القوة التي يتبعها التكليف. So he has all of these potentialities that the obligation hinges upon. وَالثَّانِي, but the second is what is said for the elect. These are not the general population, but these are the people that Allah has chosen. وَهُوَ لِمَنْ لَهُ الْحَيَاةِ. They're alive. التي العلم المقصود بقوله تعالى لينذر من كان حيا. This is to warn the one who is alive. So it's talking about the mu'min whose heart is alive. وَمَنْ كَانَ مَيِّتًا فَأَحْيَيْنَاهُ وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُ نُورًا يَمْشِي بِهِ فِي النَّاسِ. The one who is dead and we brought him to life. In other words, he was dead to spirituality and then he was brought to life by faith. وَلَهُ السَّمْعُ الَّذِي بِهِ يَسْمَعُ حَقَائِقَ الْمَعْقُولَاتِ. He can hear the realities of the intelligibles. So he can contemplate the afterlife, infinity. He can contemplate the divine attributes. والبصيرة, and he has inner sight. قل هذه سبيلي أدعو إلى الله على بصيرة. I'm calling to Allah with this inner sight, which is also these proofs. التي بها يدرك الاعتبارات. So he can understand the اعتبارات, right? So the الأمور الاعتبارية. These are the things that can be understood through intelligence. They have the existence in the intelligible realm. وَلِسَانَ الَّذِي بِهِ يُرِيدُ التَّحْقِيقَاتِ. And the tongue that can articulate the realized realities. وَهِيَ الَّتِي نَفَاهَا اللَّهُ عَنَ الْكَفَرَةِ الْجَهَلَةِ. These are the things that Allah has negated for disbeliever ignoramuses, disbelieving ignoramuses. في قوله تعالى صُمٌّ بُكْمٌ عُمْيٌ فَهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. They are blind, they're deaf, dumb, and blind, and they do not perceive. They don't perceive. They don't realize. They're not using their intellects. Alhamdulillah.